Hello everyone, my name is Lars Arne Jensen and I'm from the Research Management team at Danida Fellowship Centre, and I will take you through our online meeting today regarding the Call for Research Applications 2023. We are happy to be able to invite you and bring you to this online information meeting to introduce you on the new call just published earlier this month for 2023 for applications for development research funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. In today's session, this is being live streamed in Danida Fellowship Centre's YouTube, LinkedIn and Facebook pages. And also we will be recording this session and we will make it publicly available afterwards from our platforms, which I just mentioned. Today's program is that we will take you through an introduction to the call. We will go through what is a good application, and also we will take you through the application process. And these three sections will be followed by an answering question and Q&A session, so to speak, so that you will have your questions answered by relevant participants. If you have questions, you just feel free to post it in the chat from the three platforms, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions as possible, which are of general interest, and also we will go into a few detailed questions if that need be. If you have the specific questions which is not of general, you feel free to send it to research@dfcenter.dk and we will get back to you with a reply. And of course we will also have a Q&A on our website after this meeting. To present the call for applications 2023 and provide also do's and don'ts on how to write a good application within this call, we are very pleased to have with us today Ms. Cecilia Trisler-Gregersen. She's an advisor in the section for evaluation, learning and quality in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And also we have with us Christian Lund. He's a professor in development, research, resource management and governance at University of Copenhagen, and he's also the chair of the Consultative Research Committee for Development Research, also known as the FFU. So firstly, I will hand over the stage to Cecilia, and she will tell you more about the framework and the thematic areas of this year's call. So I'll be back later. So that's all from me. So over to you, Cecilia, please.
Thank you very much. Hi to everyone, I'm Cecilia Gregersen from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the overall strategic and thematic framework of the Call 2023 for Development Research. So let me start by framing the overall objective of Danida's support to development research, which is stated in the Danish law on international development cooperation, which states that with a view to strengthening research capacity in developing countries and creating new knowledge to address development challenges, the Minister for Development Cooperation may provide grants for research. Furthermore, the Sustainable Development Goals constitute the overall thematic framework for both development cooperation and research. And it is clear that making progress towards the SDGs requires considerable investment in research. Another important strategic document is Denmark's Strategy for Development Cooperation, The World We Share. This strategy highlights the importance of partnerships for sustainable development and being key to achieve these goals by 2030. Research partnerships play an active part in this, and the strategy states that partnerships between Danish universities and the research community in the global south are important for generating knowledge and capacity to formulate good, well-considered policies and thereby sustainable outcomes. Now, the overall theme for the Call for Research Proposals 2023 is development under conditions of climate change. The 2023 thematic focus invites proposals for projects that will help us gain a better understanding of how climate change interacts with other development threats, such as poverty, political exclusion, and displacement. It is well established that climate change and biodiversity crises are mutually reinforcing phenomena, which are increasing pressures on ecosystems in rural and urban areas, and on the world's poorest and most politically excluded and vulnerable people. Danish Development Cooperation aims to contribute to poverty alleviation for those that are hardest hit by the impacts of climate change. And therefore, we want to focus on this in our call for development research proposals this year. So, the 2023 call for development research invites proposals that examine the interactions between climate change, biodiversity, and poverty alleviation. There's a focus on identifying transformation processes that can link national or local action for human well-being with the protection of the planet. Applicants are invited from a broad range of disciplines, from the technical, natural, social, health, and economic sciences, as well as the humanities. And it's important to state that proposals must ensure that specific topics within this overall theme of climate change are clearly linked to the issue of climate change, but also the principle of the Agenda 2030 to leave no one behind. This implies that proposals consider how these transformation processes can be designed to not only avoid future harm to climate and ecosystems, but also promote improvements in human prosperity for the poorest. I also wanted to mention that we have a focus on policies, institutions, governance of climate action, but also on the tensions, conflicts, and inequalities that may arise and that we see these as essential to this call for research proposals. Now, the call for research proposals lists a number of eligible countries. The first group are those in which Denmark engages in expanded development cooperation. So the ministry has selected a number of these countries where strategic research cooperation contributes to strengthening research capacity. And this year, the countries are Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Kenya, Niger, Palestine, Somalia, Tanzania, and Uganda. The second group of eligible countries are countries in which Denmark engages in targeted development cooperation. So the call for proposals focuses on a select number of topics in countries where Denmark engages in strategic sector cooperation programs. And in the 2023 call, these are the energy sector in Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Kenya, South Africa, and Vietnam. Then there's water resource management in Ethiopia, Ghana, Morocco, and South Africa. Then we have sustainable cities in Indonesia, Kenya, and South Africa. And finally, food and agriculture in Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria, and Vietnam. So it's important to note that proposals that focus on the strategic sector cooperation programs must also sufficiently address the overall thematic frame of development under conditions of climate change. Finally, I just want to say that we're putting a focus on diversity in research funding, in particular this year. And this is both within the thematic focus, where we, in the proposal or the call, underline how climate change can exacerbate conflict and vulnerability, and that this affects various groups differently, including in relation to, for instance, gender, generation, disability, indigenous peoples, farmers, herders, urban and rural populations. But we also want to focus on diversity in the overall application and funding process. So we are committed to promoting equal opportunities for all and diversity in all its aspects. Therefore, interested parties from all backgrounds regarding ethnicity, religion, gender identity, age, or disability status are encouraged to submit research proposals. I think that's all from me now. So over to you, Lars-Arne, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. Thanks a lot. Really interesting to hear about the themes, and we have some questions for you actually through the chat. And one of them is that the themes that you just mentioned under the strategic sector cooperation, Are they very strict or specific, or would it, for example, be possible to focus on waste management under one of the specified themes?
Right. So the themes under the Strategic Sector Cooperation Programs section are set so that they follow the overall programs in the relevant countries. However, we want to emphasize that it is up to the proposals themselves to, for example, include topics such as waste management within a relevant frame. So, for example, I would say waste management is a relevant theme, for example, under sustainable cities in a number of eligible countries. But I want to say that it's really up to the applications to convincingly argue and justify for their choice of topics.
Thank you. Another question is whether Afghanistan is excluded from the list of eligible countries, because last year it was included in the list. Can you elaborate a bit on why it is?
Yes, so it is true that there are a certain number of countries where Denmark engages in expanded development cooperation which have been excluded from the list of eligible countries this year. We have consulted within the ministry and deemed that the security situations are simply too challenging for us to fund proposals in Afghanistan, Mali and Myanmar this year.
Thank you, Cecilia. And while we are touching upon the list of eligible countries, can you elaborate a bit on whether they are the same over the years, also in future calls, or will there be a revision of the list of eligible countries in future calls? Can you elaborate a bit on that, please?
Yes, so over the years, a large majority of the countries remain the same and in similar groups. Sometimes countries have moved from one group of eligible countries to another, but they largely remain relatively stable over the years. But it is a yearly discussion to select which ones will be included in the call.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you very much. One other question, also in relation to eligible countries, but also in connection to the Danish embassies, is that the context states that that the research will be conducted in collaboration with the appropriate authorities in Denmark and in partner countries, and in consultation with Danish embassy teams. Is it possible for you to elaborate a bit on this, please? How to involve the relevant embassies?
Yes, so we encourage all applicants to at least contact the Danish embassy to tell them a bit about their research proposals. Perhaps it is particularly relevant in the strategic sector cooperation programs, as there are specific advisors employed at the embassy, the relevant embassies, that you can contact for further information about what's included in the strategic sector program. So we highly encourage you to check out the embassy websites and write a mail and try to reach out to them.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Yes. Thanks. Another question that just came in the chat is a question on where is it possible to find more information about the content of the strategic sector cooperation programs?
Yes, so I believe in the call there is a link to a page on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website where there is a brief introduction to strategic sector programs and a list over the different programs which are the same as the relevant ones are included in this call. But again, you can reach out to the advisors at the ministers or the embassies for more information regarding this.
Thanks a lot, Cecilia. Thank you very much. It seems like there's not really any more questions for you in the chat, so that was a very easy round for you.
Yes, great.
If you have any more questions out there and you don't know yet whether it should be relevant or not, please do not hesitate to either write it in the chat and we take it later, or send an email to research@dfcenter.dk, then we will get back to you afterwards. So with this, it's time for a break actually. Maybe we should just take 5 minutes break and then we will be back with Christian Lund, the chair of the FFU. So see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. We're now happy to welcome Christian Lund to the stage. Christian is a professor at University of Copenhagen, as I mentioned before, and also the chair of the Consultative Advisory Group for Development Research, known as the FFU. And Christian will give you some do's and don'ts on how to write the good application, hopefully. So Christian, please.
Thank you very much. I need to apologize first because I almost have no voice, but I'll see if I can struggle through this. These 5-10 slides. First of all, the council is made up of 8 researchers who themselves have been active researchers for a while. We have, in addition to me, we have Lotte Meinert, who is from Aarhus University. We have Erik Skov Madsen from University of Southern Denmark. We have Christine No from the University of Dar es Salaam, John Christensen from the UNEP Centre. We have Helene Kyd from DIS, and we have Anja Nygren from the University of Helsinki, and we have Ola Vesterengen from the Norwegian Agricultural University. And then in addition to that, we have Tove Deinbo from the Ministry as an observer in the council. The application procedure is 2-phased. That means that applicants send in one application first that we examine and then we select the most promising ones for a second round, and then people will make a more elaborate and fuller application. I think in this year we're just finishing now. We had 120, 130 applications in the first round, and we cut the number down to around 25 or 35 to send in for a second round. And out of those, there will be 18, 19 projects selected. So it is a very tough competition, so it's worth thinking carefully about how you write your application and try to be as approachable to a council of educated people who are not specialists in your field necessarily. The council also plays a role in quality assurance. Those people who have research projects approved will have to report in on a regular basis, and this is being examined by members of the council just to make sure that there's progress in the different research projects. I should maybe also say that we work with quite strict rules about conflicts of interest. If a member of the council is related to an applicant, has published with an applicant, or works in the same institution as the applicant, the member of the council steps out of the room when the application is being discussed by the council. And stepping out of the room is not a euphemism, it's actually you leave the room and the rest of the council deliberates, makes a decision, and then you're invited back in. 3 criteria for assessment in phase 1: quality, relevance, and effect. So when we try to assess the quality of the applications, we look very carefully at the applicant, the main applicant, his or her research experience. So the CV is an important part of the application. I should say that the members of the council, as you saw, we're all academics, so we also know how to blow up a CV out of proportion, and we can see if it's being sort of pumped up into unrealistic dimensions. So just write your CV as relevant as it can be to the application, but try to remain within sort of the perimeters of reason. It's almost every time there's somebody who's decorating the CV a little too much, and it's not to the benefit of the applicant. Then we look at the substance of the application. We look at the innovative and original elements in the application. Finally, we look at the way that the application is crafted. Is it well defined? Does it speak to the call? Does it speak to the criteria of themes? Does it engage with the call in a meaningful way? The relevance in a research application for this council is made up of two connected elements. One is that it should be relevant to the call, but it should also respond to development priorities in Danish development policy. I think most applicants or applications I've seen, that has not been very difficult to do. Read the relevant policy pages, read the instructions for writing the application. It's not complicated, it's just difficult. And that's not the same thing. And then when we assess the applications, we also try to look for effect or possible effect. We would like the research project to address a real issue where we need knowledge about a specific set of problems, that's quite important. But we also try to see whether this project is engaging with local researchers and institutions and is somehow connecting with what the country in question considers relevant research as well. Applications that are defined by relevance criteria that are uniquely relevant for the research team in Denmark, they tend not to do very well in this competition. And then the final one says the contribution of the project to strengthening a research capacity. This is very important, but as you can see, research capacity is somewhat elastic. It can be done in different ways. One way of strengthening research capacity is to have local PhD students who will get training in research and be educated through the research project, so to say. But it's not only PhDs who can have their research capacities enhanced. Postdocs or even tenured staff at local universities are also part of the enhancement of research capabilities. Sometimes we also look at demands for different types of infrastructure for the participating departments from the south. But basically, it's important in the application that we can see that there is an engagement with a real department, that there's a plan for enhancing their research capacity, and it has a longer view, maybe even longer than the project itself. So if you are lucky enough to survive the first round and are invited to send in an application for the second round, we begin to look very carefully at the inner structure of the project. How is it managed? Does it look feasible? Does it look as if the challenges that are in any project can be dealt with in a sober and pragmatic and sensible way by the organizational structure in the process. the project coordinator's managerial skills are scrutinized. So it's an advantage to have experience. But everybody has to make their first project sometime. But then maybe if it's your first project, don't make it super complicated. Try to keep management as simple as it can be. The problems that will arise will bring enough complications as it is. We try to look at the proposed design and activities in the application, and here just a sort of a piece of friendly advice. I think people should share their applications with each other much more than what seems to happen. You can get good ideas from other people's applications. They can also get good ideas from yours. And I think overall you'll get better applications if people try to exchange a little more of experience and also how to construct robust projects to deal with, or robust structures to deal with the research project. And it also relates a little bit to the last issue. Some of the countries that were eligible last year have fallen out for security reasons. That doesn't mean that there are no security questions to be addressed in the remaining countries. So if you are applying for a project, it is a consideration that we take very seriously. We don't require you to have the capacity to eliminate all dangers, but we do require you to have thought about what will you do in the face of this and this and this eventuality. And I think it's getting increasingly high up on the agenda, and it would be sad to not be considered for a research project just because one has not taken the security aspect seriously. So I urge you to, again, look at the instructions and write in a pragmatic, sober, sensible way. How are you facing the risks that are inevitably embedded in a research project in a country like whatever country you're working in? Recommendations for how to sort of make the application do relate to the theme described in the call. I mean, you would think that it would be unnecessary to write this, but it isn't. We get applications that seem to rely on the goodwill of the council, that it's up to us to figure out how this is relating to the call. And if we only had 5 applications a year, that would probably be okay, but the competition is very stiff. And if you don't make it easy for the council to read, you're already running behind all the other applications. So it's relevant to, or important to, write about how your application is relevant to the call. Formulate research questions and hypotheses that describe the innovative nature of the proposed research and how conventional wisdom may be challenged. Again, you would expect that this is an integral part of an application. It's not always the case, but it's a really good idea to state clearly how your research is different from what we have seen up until now. Do explain carefully how the project contributes to new knowledge by positioning it in relation to existing research. Again, like any other research council, you need to be able to substantiate your claim that this is new. it's not enough just to put in a list of references. You have to argue in prose why this project is likely to yield knowledge and capacity building that we would otherwise not have. Do consider capacity strengthening elements based upon needs of the part of the sector, and consider elements beyond PhD training. I think I mentioned that before. It's not enough to have a really good idea and then sprinkle a PhD student on at the last moment, saying that, by the way, we will also have one local PhD who will work on perceptions. That's simply not convincing. It looks as if it's an afterthought and not part of an integrated idea. I think the best argument for doing this well is to tell you that the success rate is very low. There are many applications, and there are many good applications, and if some of these things are very unclear or not convincing, they will not make it. They will not make it to the second round, and they will not get funding. Consider innovative ways of disseminating findings, including towards public and policy makers. Again, very often we get applications that get to this point 5 minutes in closing time, and it's not really an integrated part of the project. It becomes an add-on, and it's simply not convincing. So try to think about who should benefit from this research, even at the outset of your conceptualization of the problem. It will make the application much more convincing. Make sure that the main responsible researcher can allocate sufficient time. Again, I'll just go back to the council. We are all experienced researchers. We know that if you put the dean of your faculty on with a month, it's really unlikely that the dean will spend a month on this, right? So try not to spread the man-months onto irrelevant people, but concentrate the man-months on the people who are actually going to do the work. We can read these applications and we can see why unsound compromises are being made, and it's not an advantage. Maybe it's an advantage in your local institution to have lots of people named, but then it will be killed in the assessment procedure. So think about what constitutes a sound team for your research project. Some projects, they become irrelevant because the team is too large, with too many people having too little to do in the project. Do ensure a good balance between input from each of the project partners. Again, when you compose the team, make sure that it's not too skewed, that it's not with token participation from the country in the south, but make sure that it's that the application has the integrity it needs to release the kind of money that we are spending on this. Make sure that everybody has a credible function in the project, and of course it's difficult to specify this, but I'm sure that every applicant knows with himself or herself whether a name is put on for decoration or whether it's because the person is actually going to contribute to the team's work. Be focused and realistic and feasible. Sometimes we get questions about whether you can have two thematic problems in the same application, or do both very focused and very broad background research in the same application. Maybe you can, but my guess is that applications like that will have a tough time reaching the finishing line. The best applications are the applications that make it to the second round, and the applications in the second round that make it to funding are the ones that are most focused, that are focusing on a problem in a concentrated and serious and professional way. We can't prevent people from writing unfocused applications, but they don't survive in the selection procedure. Make sure that the research is analytical rather than descriptive. This research council is a little bit different from the research councils in the other research councils we have in Denmark, but not in terms of quality and substance. If you have a research problem, we will expect there to be an analytical explanation, a conceptual description of the problem, and a carefully crafted scientific plan for it, not just a description. Again, we sometimes see applications that describe a problem, but in non-analytical terms, and they simply don't survive. They are being winnowed out as we move on to the second round. Consider that interdisciplinarity is an asset, and make sure that you have the right competencies in your team. Interdisciplinarity is often an advantage, not always, but often. And again, just to stay in tune with what I just said, it's easy to see when interdisciplinarity becomes a token mention of a particular discipline, that it's overwhelmingly one discipline, and then there's a token mention of another discipline. That doesn't make it interdisciplinary research. And I doubt that applications like that will be successful very often. So the reason that interdisciplinarity has a high value with the council is that the problems that we would want you to address in your research are multifaceted and require the perspective of more than one discipline. It's not just because we want to have different CVs in a bundle. It's because the project is addressing a problem that in itself deserves to be addressed in more than one way. Okay, maybe I've already said some of these, but this is basically a list that we add to, I guess, from year to year. This is a research council, and we are funding research. We're not funding development projects. If you have a really good idea for a development project, you have to look elsewhere. This is funding for the production of new knowledge and the enhancement of research capacities in the South. So if you have a gadget you want to spread all over the world, you have to look for funding somewhere else. And I don't want to be too dismissive about it, but we do get applications where all the applicant needs is a bit of money and time, and then to be left alone to promote his or her gadget. But that's not what the Research Council is for. We all need to collect data in our research, but data collection in itself is not a research project. It has to somehow have a defined problem, and analytical language, and some concepts to make it possible for the council to imagine what kind of research this will be. Data collection as such is not something that we're funding. This is maybe the same as the beginning. Do not apply for a development project. I mean, if you have a really good idea for a development project, you have to address the ministry in a different way than through this council. Sometimes we get applications which are very close to consultancy analysis or assignment. They don't survive to the second round, and they don't survive to get funding. What is it? Do not apply for PhD projects only without sufficient involvement of the senior. Do not apply for PhD projects only without sufficient involvement of the senior researchers. Again, I mean, the experience in the council is fairly broad, and we've all supervised PhD students. We've all had PhD students who did really well and some who did a lot less well. And we can also see in the proportion of time allocated if this is unrealistically little supervision. So try not to skimp on that. If you have PhD students, they need to be supervised properly. Otherwise, it's not realistic that they will finish. And then the final one: do not apply for funding for your entire institute. Yeah, I think that's what I said before. You don't need to send the whole list of employees as participants in your project. It's simply not realistic. And it's easy to see when that happens. And I'm sure most of you don't, and that's very nice. Just put in the people that are necessary for the execution of the research project. No more, no less. That was it. My voice is done. That was the last few notes you get out of me today.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thanks so much for taking your time and voice to come here and present for us today. And very soon I'll let you rest. But before I let you rest, to regain voice until the assessment of the phase 1 applications, we do have a bit questions that I will torment you with. But let's take it as it comes. Yeah. Thanks. Christian, question is just on the last topic you mentioned about the number of partners to be included in a proposal. Can you elaborate a bit on how the FFU assesses or looks at the number of partners to be included, whether it's just one partner or a lot more? Can you say anything general about that, please?
I think what we want is for an FFU project to involve local partners. I think we want the involvement to be significant. I think we want the involvement to be meaningful for the conduct of the research and also to ensure the actual production of knowledge through the use of one partner. Some people involve 2 partners. That's probably also very good. But there's a limit to the funding, right? So if you begin to have 3, 4, 5 partners, they begin to have this token character where it becomes less and less credible that they actually will play a role in your project. And then that raises suspicions among the council members. So I think depending on what your research project is about, if it's about, what could it be, water supply, then it would make perfect sense if there's a hydraulic institute at the local technical university, and there's also a Ministry of Water Supply, and they were somehow involved. But maybe you should then work with those most relevant institutions, right? The budget seems generous, but it actually goes really fast on salaries. So there's a limit to how many people you can have on a full-time or just half-time commitment to a project. So be selective.
Thanks, Christian. Makes good sense. And while we are at it, we're in relation to the budget, there's also the question on the budget share going to the North universities versus the South universities. Can you elaborate a bit on that? And also, because that's also in relation to the number of partners, of course.
Actually, I can't. I think you should elaborate on that. I don't even know what that proportion is. Maybe I should have read it up, but it doesn't ring a bell. And I know that there's a division, but salaries are more expensive in Denmark than they are in Tanzania, and that justifies, to some extent, this skewed distribution of funds. But I think you would do really well in having it posted in front of you all the time with the total amount, because it sounds generous. It's not stingy, but there's a limit to how much you can actually do for 10-12 million Danish crowns.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. A question here from Beatrice, who asks whether it's possible for a project coordinator to submit more than one proposal, and how will the FFU look at that if you have, for example, 2 or 3 applications submitted in phase 1?
I don't think we have any rules about it, but I would be a little bit apprehensive. This is not a lottery, right? So if you send in 3 applications and they're the best applications in the world, and you get funding for 3 applications, what would you do? If you promised yourself away on 3 applications, you can't conduct 3 projects. So that's not realistic. I think the best thing is to figure out, what do you want to do most? What do you want to do best? Concentrate on one project. Make sure you have an excellent team. Make sure you have an excellent research profile in the team. Make sure you have a good plan, a good structure. Don't try to carpet bomb the council with 3 applications. I don't think they will get through.
Thanks. Another question is, you mentioned earlier that one of the don'ts is to submit a development project proposal. Could you also give an example, for instance, of a consultancy project? Because that's also one of the things that the council will look at, isn't it?
Well, sometimes we get applications that ask questions about how to tweak existing infrastructure into more optimal performance. And in my view, that could be done by Rambøll or Covi or somebody else. We don't necessarily need to spend research money on this. It's not that it's an irrelevant task. It's just not research in the way that most people in the council understands it. We have an ongoing discussion in the council, and we're not all in agreement all the time. But I think basically you can define research as asking a question to which you do not already know the answer. And if you ask a question to which you already know the answer, I think we're moving fast into the consultancy world, where it's just a question of tweaking existing procedures to optimize. And that kind of application will have a tough time.
Agreed. Thanks. On the topic regarding resubmission of applications which have previously been to the FFU assessment, can you say a bit about how the FFU looks at an application which has been revised and being resubmitted in the coming phase?
Well, I mean, if an application is being doesn't make it to the second round, or doesn't make it in the second round, then the applicant gets some comments from the council on what are the weaknesses that were discussed, what would we like the applicant to address. If the applicant does this, we're very happy to see it again. But of course, then it's a new application and it competes again with 129 other applications. So there's no guarantee that one will get a better chance in the second round, except that maybe you make more of an effort to address some of the weaknesses you had in your first version of your application. But we don't have a sort of a black book or a list of people we find irritating because they keep applying. That's not how it works.
Great. And nor does DFC, by the way, just to make that clear. Thanks. Final question for you, Christian, I think, is that regarding private sector involvement, can you elaborate a bit on how FFU looks at the private sector and how it should be involved in a research application?
That's really difficult to say anything about in very general terms. I think if we get an application where there's an involvement from the private sector, I think one of the first things we would look at is if this is such a good idea that a private sector company wants to engage in it, why don't they just do it themselves? And if that is because they need to be paired up with local expertise of a technical kind or a socioeconomic kind and so on, then we'll look at it very seriously. But I think we would be quite vigilant to look at what is the contribution from this particular partner. So when we have your standard applications, it's not just that people ask for money, but they're basically offering expertise to solve a problem, and for that we give some money. So if you have a private company participating in a research project, we will look at the same thing. What are the competencies and skills that this particular company brings to the research project that we couldn't get elsewhere? How is it being factored in? Is it unreasonably expensive, or is it actually a good deal where everybody is bringing their respective skills to this project? But it's not really, the FFU is not an opportunity for a private company to let the council pay for something that they should have paid for themselves.
Yeah. Thanks, Christian. Are you okay for 2 more questions?
Yes.
And your voice is also?
There's nothing left.
Thanks. Christian, just about this, you also touched upon it in your presentation regarding including 2 themes, or even also combining the targeted and expanded countries in an application. How does the FFU look at that? And do you have any?
I think depth over breadth any day. This is research. We're not trying to do a wall-to-wall description of Uganda. We're focusing on a particular problem that is so complicated that it requires trained researchers to solve it. Then do that. Don't try to spread yourself too much. It's not because research in Uganda is any different from research in Denmark in that sense. You need to be focused, you need to be skilled, you need to be concentrated, you need to have a strong team, you need to have complementary skills, and that doesn't change just because you do a project in Uganda.
Thanks. Final question. Also, that comes from what you touched upon earlier regarding the research capacity which these projects are supposed to bring about. Can you elaborate a bit on what the FFU perceives as research capacity in this context? Is it only PhD education, or are there also other aspects to be included?
So PhDs are important in this, but I think if you co-supervise PhD students with local professors, there's also an element of capacity development at the level of the supervisor in the country. I think that it's not the objective of the FFU to enhance research capacity in the north, but research capacity is enhanced when we do research projects like this, when we do exchanges where people from, say, Uganda come to Copenhagen or come to Denmark for a considerable time, and our researchers go to Uganda for a considerable time. This is what we are looking at. It's not only PhDs, but they seem to be quite important. Most PhDs are also much more mobile than senior researchers. They are much more eager to go to Denmark or go to another country. So they are somehow, it's easier to see the fast rate of capacity enhancement. But I think it makes a lot of sense to think the capacity enhancement of PhDs through the local institutions. It may be less visible how capacity is being enhanced, but if they have a group of PhD students, maybe even your Danish PhD students spending time there, it's all part of this academic culture that strengthens an otherwise weak institution. Most of the local university departments that we are working with, they don't have funding to have a scholarship program to invite 20 students to come and spend a semester there. But it doesn't mean that they wouldn't benefit a lot if you have Danish, European or other PhD students spending time with their PhD students in the locality, just as it's good when they spend time together in a Danish institution. So it's not only PhD students, but they're neat packages in a project very often. But I think it's worth thinking about how to integrate local senior researchers in a supervisory capacity.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thanks a lot. I will let you rest, I think. I think it is needed. Maybe a cup of tea, even. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and tips and tricks on this.
Very good.
And hope that you will have a lot of your answers out there, your questions answered through Christian's insights. So, we only have one thing left on the agenda today, and that's actually an overview of the application process, which I will take you through from an administrative point of view. And of course, you're still welcome to post your questions in the chat, and we will do our utmost to answer these questions at the end of the session. So, you probably have read about the deadline already in the application process, in the application website, which we have at DFC, that we have actually postponed the phase 1 deadline up to February 24, 2023, due to the political situation in Denmark now, where we still are without a government, so that we will hopefully be able to give you, we are able to give you a bit more time to do your phase 1 application. So, put in your calendar 24th of February at 1 p.m. The full application in phase 2 as the same fixed deadline as in the call text, which is on 16th of August. The projects which are funded are envisaged to kick off between 1st of February and 1st of April 24. And the project period will be up to 5 years, and you have a budget of a maximum of 10 million Danish kroner. So who can actually apply for these funds? The applicants are researchers, but it's also institutions. So the grants are given to universities or research-based institutions who have the capacity to supervise PhD students. The project coordinator must be affiliated or attached to the responsible institution and must hold a PhD or a higher or same level as a PhD. There's also the possibility of having a co-coordinator applying with the coordinator, and the co-coordinator must also hold a PhD and also be affiliated with the responsible institution. And of course, the research team, which is in holding this application must have a research background within the topic applied for, of course, so they can cover the themes applied for. Of course, you can have other participating researchers and institutions and also private sector partners, as Christian just mentioned earlier. It is, we do expect that all partners contribute actively to the preparation of the phase 1 applications and surely also the phase 2. You can involve private sector partners and also national authorities, and we encourage that, of course. But also, as Christian mentioned, make sure that it's just not a consultancy application for a consultancy company. And also, of course, international research institutions and other research-based institutions in the countries outside of Denmark and also in the partner countries, they can also be included as secondary partners, and they can be included for their direct input to the project. In the call text and also in the general conditions for research calls, you will find out more about what direct input covers. We have an electronic application system which is called SurveyMonkey Apply. It's accessible from the Danida Fellowship Centre's website, and you'll also find the link in the call text. And the proposed project coordinator must be the one to create the e-application, so that the coordinator is also the applicant. And all research partners, they can access the application. All you need to do is to invite your partners as collaborators in the system. And the acknowledgement of receipt of the application, that will be sent to you, to the application owner, and that is also you being the applicant. Just to take you through the SurveyMonkey Apply application system, we have produced a small video. Not actually a small video, I think it's 7-8 minutes, but it's a kind of tutorial where we show you the online application system. You will find a link to the video in the chat now, and also on our website, the same webpage as you find the call text. Just a few recommendations on what to do from an administratively point of view. We really encourage you to once again carefully read the call text and the instructions in the e-application form and the application guide, because there's also useful information to be found there. We do really strongly encourage you to comply with the formal requirements which are set in the call, and that you of course fill in the e-application correctly. I mean, if you do not comply with the formal requirements, the applications will be rejected without further assessment by the FFU or DFC. And also, we do really recommend that you start well ahead of the deadline, as we see several projects and applicants every year calling us 2 minutes before the deadline and say, we have a problem in uploading CVs, we have a problem in this and that. And we are sorry to say, but there will be no grace period, unfortunately. It has to be equal for all applicants. Also, we would encourage you to involve all your partner applicants in the planning, both in the e-application, just to ensure a bit of ownership and surely also to adjust expectations. We also need you, or require you, to have all your endorsements submitted before you can actually submit the application in the system. So it's not possible to submit an application which has not been endorsed by you as the applicant or your institution. And once the application has been submitted in the e-application system, it cannot be changed. So therefore, we strongly encourage you to go through the application, maybe even one more time than you envisaged, just to check that everything is okay, and that you also can read the uploaded CVs and other documents required. About the requirements for the application to be considered by the FFU, it must be submitted by a nationally registered university or research-based institution in Denmark, and only in Denmark, with the capacity to supervise PhD students, as I mentioned earlier. The proposed project coordinator, who's applying on behalf of the responsible institution, must hold a PhD or equivalent at the time of applying. And as Christian also mentioned earlier, it's okay, you don't need to have 10 projects experience as a manager, project manager to submit, but at the time of submitting, you must hold a PhD. The application has to be submitted through the e-application system, SurveyMonkey Apply. It must be submitted within the set deadline, of course. It is not possible to submit after the deadline. And surely it must include the correct CV of the project coordinator and co-coordinator, if this one exists. And that is also what you are required to check before you submit, as it is not possible to change the application after submitting. All the attachments has to be complete and successfully uploaded. This is also one of the things we ask you to check, as it is your responsibility to ensure this. The application must be endorsed by the project coordinator, applicant, and the head of the responsible institution. The names of the endorser must be matched by the names of project coordinator and head of institution, so that we are aware that it is actually your head of institution endorsing this and not just your colleague next door. If an endorsement is provided by another person on behalf of, that could be your colleague next door, it should be mandated from the head of institution, and it has to be noted in the comment for the endorsement that you are signing on behalf of or endorsing on behalf of. The application must include at least one nationally registered research partner in one of the eligible countries listed in the call text, which Cecilia presented before. So it's a collaboration between Danish research institutions and South research institutions. And the application must include at least one named researcher or project participant from each of the listed partner institutions. In the phase 1, you don't need to have the full research team in the application. It's possible in the phase 2 application to include more researchers to complete your team, but at least one named researcher from each of the listed partner institutions must be included. That's all for the presentation. So let's now go to the section on questions, because a few questions has come in while I was reading to you the slides. There's one question, actually there are several questions that mentions that there's an interest to apply for the grant, but I don't have a Danish partner yet. Can I still apply and then find the Danish partner later? And unfortunately, that is not possible. You need a partner to be included in the phase 1 application. So that one you have to find, unfortunately. And there's also questions whether DFC or other in Danida or the FFU can assist in finding a partner for your project idea. And to that, we also have to say that is not possible because we have to keep arm's length to applicants, and we cannot sort of provide contact to partners, potential partners, unfortunately. A question whether can other countries than the eligible countries listed in the call be part of the project? If possible, under which conditions? Well, as I just said, international partners are welcome in the applications, and they can be included in the project as international partners or secondary partners, and they can be compensated for their direct inputs to the projects. One question is whether a PhD student can be an applicant. No, unfortunately not. At the time of the submission of application, you must have your PhD degree in hand, unfortunately. So it can only be applicants having a PhD or equivalent. There's a question on whether Danish research institution charges overhead to the application to the project, and of course they do. They can charge 44% in total, and South partners can charge 20%. That's also stated in the call text, as I believe it. There's a question whether it's mandatory to have a project involving at least 2 countries or more, or is 1 country sufficient? And 1 country is sufficient. 1 South partner is enough to submit your application. Patrick asks here whether a submitted application can be administratively rejected because the named PhD students have not endorsed the application. No, it will not be administratively rejected because of this. The important thing is that you, as the project coordinator, and your head of institution, as the responsible institution, endorses the application. All other research partners are not required to endorse the application in phase 1. That is not until phase 2. So please do hold your endorsements and make it only yourself and your head of institution. It says here, question from Louis, whether the co-coordinator, should that also be from Denmark as well? And yes, the co-coordinator also must be affiliated to the responsible institution applying for the grant, which I just presented before. So we do acknowledge and know that several projects are working with a co-coordinator also in the south, and that's perfectly all right. But it's the co-coordinator to be mentioned in the application must be affiliated to the responsible institution applying for the grant. One final question, as I see that the chat is almost drying out. One final question is that whether an alumni network across universities in former Danida or currently funded students, can they apply for the funds? And again, I'm sorry to say that, that as much as we would like to also support alumni networks across the former Danida countries, it's not possible. It simply has to be applied for by a responsible institution in Denmark, a research-based organization or university. So unfortunately, that's not a possibility. We have one final question, or at least a new one coming in here from Meng, saying that, is it a requirement for the partners to have previously collaborated, or is it okay that the research team consists of new partners for the first time? And we can say that it is not a requirement that you have collaborated before. So it's perfectly okay to get together to get together a new research team. To make your first application with this team. It's not a requirement that you have collaborated over the years. Of course, we see the strong partnerships they have collaborated over the years, but it's not a requirement. So we can only encourage you to try your luck and set up a new team, a new network to apply for these funds. I think that is it for questions in the chat, actually. So you're always welcome to send more questions, either at our mail, research@dfcenter.dk, which you will also find at our website. And you're also welcome to call us. But we do prefer questions to be mailed to us so that we can answer in the writing, so that we never... Or we can, more to say, we can always document what's been said and not what has been said over the phone. So please do that. You can also, of course, you can also see this presentation again if you feel like it. It may be that there were some points missing out on the way, and they will be available online through our platforms. And with this, I will thank you all for following our information meeting today. We do hope that it was well spent, that you also feel that, and really looking forward to receive your applications. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.